Let's just imagine for a second that you're standing in front of a judge. Your entire future is literally hanging in the balance. But then, you realize the judge is actually relying on an algorithm to make their decision. Crazy, right? It sounds completely like science fiction. But guys, this is the very real, immediate reality we're dealing with right now. So, when artificial intelligence actually enters the courtroom, who makes the final call? Is it the human or the machine?
Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving deep into a massive game-changing development in legal tech, the Indian Supreme Court's brand new draft AI regulations. And to really understand what's going on, we're going to be looking at this through the lens of a super fascinating and incredibly detailed response submitted by the Foundation of Data Protection Professionals in India. We'll just call them the FDPPI for short.
Now, before we get into the actual rules, we really need to know who's giving this feedback. The official 2026 submission we are discussing today comes from the FDPPI. They're a not-for-profit group of totally independent professionals, which is absolutely crucial because it means they aren't just aligned with big tech interests. Plus, this whole thing was spearheaded by cyber law pioneer Naavi. So yeah, we're looking at a highly credible analysis of AI governance here.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, AI entering the courtroom. Second, human primacy over algorithms. Third, streamlining the AI bureaucracy. Fourth, independent audits and safety. Fifth, defining artificial intelligence. And finally, number 6, the vision for restrained innovation. Okay, let's jump right in.
Section 1. AI enters the courtroom. The Supreme Court's draft.
You know, what's really interesting is that the FDPPI actually opens their critique not by tearing the Supreme Court's draft down, but by praising it. They straight up declare it to be one of the absolute most comprehensive judicial AI governance frameworks proposed anywhere in the world. They even note that, in substance, it's practically ready to be taken forward as a formal instrument right now. I mean, this is a major milestone for legal technology.
Moving on to Section 2. Human primacy over algorithms. The absolute rule.
Okay, so this is the absolute, rock-solid foundational rule of the whole framework. It's taken directly from Section 4 of the draft, and it explicitly guarantees that the use of AI shall at all times remain strictly subservient to human judgment and judicial authority. The FDPPI actually calls this the single most important feature of the entire framework. And you can see why, right? It totally ensures that machines are just there to assist. They will absolutely never replace human judges.
And to really enforce that human primacy, Regulation 20 establishes these absolute, non-negotiable bans. Basically, there can be zero algorithmic adjudication. That means a computer simply cannot decide your case, period. There's also no risk scoring allowed and definitely no behavioral profiling. The FDPII is strongly urging that these prohibitions be kept exactly as they are without any dilution whatsoever, because that is exactly how you protect fundamental human justice.
All right, Section 3, streamlining the AI bureaucracy. Cost versus scale.
So the original draft actually proposes a highly decentralized system. We're talking an apex body, 5 subcommittees, and then individual AI committees at every single high court across India. But the FDPI points out a pretty massive flaw here. Just imagine the sheer cost and the ridiculous duplication of effort if every single high court has to independently test and approve the exact same piece of software. It's a logistical nightmare. Their fix? Much more elegant. They're proposing a streamlined, centralized model, basically just one general AI council chaired by the Chief Justice and one central technical committee that handles vendor approvals for everybody. Simple, right?
Section 4. Independent audits and safety. Who watches the watchers? Now, the original draft relies pretty heavily on in-house audits, but the FDPI argues that, well, that kind of lacks true objectivity. You can't just grade your own homework. They are demanding independent, security-cleared external auditors. And to actually make this work in practice, they suggest sorting all AI systems into 4 really strict risk classifications. You've got low risk, which is stuff like simple translation. Medium risk is your legal research. High risk covers things like predictive analytics. And then there's critical risk. This is the highest tier, and it applies to literally any AI that could affect an adjudicatory outcome.
And for every single one of these systems, you absolutely need an unbroken chain of accountability. You can't just buy some AI off the shelf from a vendor, plug it in, and hope for the best. FDPPI's framework requires an actual, named human being at every single step. There has to be a vendor developer, a specific vendor human handler who's actually listed in the contract, and a court-designated officer. This basically guarantees that there is always a human being on the hook for whatever the algorithm spits out.
But what happens if an AI system just goes completely rogue?
Well, the FDPI demands that all of those critical risk systems have a tamper-proof kill switch. But here is the really crucial part. That kill switch must be controlled completely independently of the AI model itself. So the AI literally cannot be allowed to access or override its own termination sequence. Think of it as a literal emergency brake for the justice system. Pull it, and the machine stops.
So that begs the question, right? What about the software that these courts are already using today? Well, the framework proposes a really crucial one-year compliance review window. Basically, vendors get exactly 1 year to bring all their legacy systems all the way up to these incredibly rigorous new security and accountability standards. The clock starts ticking.
Moving to Section 5, Defining Artificial Intelligence, the definitional battle.
Legally defining what AI actually is, it's a massive, massive challenge. The Supreme Court's draft takes this sort of ontological, capability-based approach. They're basically asking if a machine infers, learns, or generates. But the FDPPI compares this to their own framework, which is much more functional. Their framework asks, has human intervention fallen below an acceptable threshold? So while the court is asking, hey, what is the machine actually doing? The FDPPI is asking a very different question. They're asking, at what exact point have we humans lost control?
So what's the solution? Well, the FDPPI suggests a combined approach. They recommend taking those globally aligned descriptive boundaries from the court's draft, using that to set the overall outer limits of what actually constitutes AI. But then, you layer that with a control-based risk classification so you can actually regulate it in the real world. It's honestly brilliant, because it gives the courts the absolute best of both worlds. You get that global alignment, but you also get practical operational safety.
And finally, Section 6, the vision, restrained innovation.
Now, the Supreme Court's original draft laid out this guiding principle of innovation over restraint, and that definitely signals a very enthusiastic push for adopting all this new tech. But the FDPI, they're throwing up a caution flag here. They're warning against moving way too fast, especially in a courtroom setting where AI risks, like, those AI hallucinations we've all heard about, are practically unquantifiable. So they suggest flipping that principle completely around to restrained innovation. Yes, you absolutely want to encourage helpful tools, but you can never, ever do that at the expense of judicial reliability and the public's trust.
This whole incredible piece of feedback actually culminates with the signature of Naavi, the founder-chairman of the FDPI, formally closing out this 2026 submission. And really, that signature represents a massive community of data protection professionals who are stepping up, offering their deep expertise to make absolutely sure the Indian judiciary gets this right.
So, all of this leaves us with a pretty provocative question to end on today. Can India really create the world's first truly comprehensive judicial AI framework without sacrificing human justice? Well, the Supreme Court has undeniably laid an incredible foundation here. And as the FDPI points out, with just a few smart refinements to things like centralization, independent audits, and legal definitions, the answer is a resounding yes. This explainer really shows just how close we are to seeing a genuine global model for responsible AI. So, what are your thoughts on algorithms making decisions in the courtroom? Take a second to really think about that one. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.